Okay. Let's figure out this audio. Everything looks good now. Okay. Let me just make sure we're live. Pulling up the chat now. Let's see. All right. So we're going to go for about an hour, like we have the last couple of weeks. I think that this week is pretty difficult week in when it all comes down to it. So let me just tweet this out so that we can make sure that everyone who wants to know about it knows about it. Yeah. Anyway. Everybody doing? Hopefully everyone's staying safe. Univ Poke, I see you. Wow. We will get started in just a second. Okay. So similar format to what we've done in the past. I think that, all questions are welcome. It is going to be a little bit more of a DFS show, just because that's more of my specialty. But I think that it's largely, I know that everyone has a ton of questions as we head into the football playoffs. So any questions that anyone has, please make sure to bring those up, and we can certainly talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. So this is largely for you guys, and we can certainly talk about strategy. We can talk about players. We can talk about just overall, if you're out of it and are thinking about keepers for next year, we can talk about that. But really, whatever you guys want to talk about. So here we go. So I'll just pull up the first couple of questions. So Mixon or Eckler in a 2021 dynasty setup. So I'm assuming you mean for next year. I would go, that's tough. So Mixon, I'm not a dynasty player. Let me just clarify that. So Mixon, I think you'd have to look at his contract. He just signed, didn't he? 24. I would tend to lean Mixon, I guess. I think that he has more upside there. Let's see. FanDuel League includes Sunday, Monday games. Anyone you like from Denver, Washington, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, San Francisco, you're welcome. I think that Aaron Jones in a FanDuel League was always a bit of a challenge. But let me just pull up what I have projected for them. Admittedly, my numbers are in line for it, but I don't always focus on those games. So let's see. People that I like from that game in terms of value. So just looking at, what do we say? Broncos, Chiefs, Steelers, 49ers, Bills, Washington. The top values for me, I think that, certainly Mahomes comes up as one of the best quarterbacks on this slate, and we'll talk about quarterbacks on this slate in a minute, but it's tough out there. It's not a great spot for quarterbacks this week. Other values that I like, I think the Chiefs defense could be in play. I think the Antonio Gibson is in a tough matchup, so I don't know about that one, but it's sort of, maybe you could go with the Pittsburgh receiver and like a Deontay Johnson, but I think there's enough. I think there's enough here that you could probably just focus on the Kansas City side of things and largely ignore the rest of it. You've been having problems with stacking Watson. It looked worse as the week's gone on. What do I think? Well, I think there's two different ways to stack it. Watson's in a bit of a unique scenario this week in that he may have to run more than he typically does. So as the week goes on, it looks like it's going to be Brandon Cooks. Kiki Cutie is interesting, I guess. I don't know if he has the upside that you're looking for in a stack. So I think if I was going to stack him, it's going to be the most popular stack. It would be Brandon Cooks, but I think that Watson could pay off by not stacking him. And he's had games where he runs for 2 touchdowns. So I don't know that you need to stack him. Cooks is going to be one of the more popular plays in the slate. FanDuel cash locks. So the guys that I've written up on the key question to a FanDuel slate this week is whether or not you're playing Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henry. I'm tending to lean towards Derrick Henry, as scary as that is. Save the $500 and really try to look at the upward and downward trajectory, and Henry is only getting stronger as the season goes forward, and that's been his MO with the last really couple of years. So the Browns defense I'm not worried about. Statistically, they're okay, but if you dive into their numbers, they've allowed big games to Josh Jacobs. They allowed a big game to James Robinson last week. And then there was I think 1 or 2 other running backs that burned them very early on in the season. So the Browns are interesting in that they've played probably the worst schedule in football. But I think Derrick Henry has a big game. Dalvin Cook, I'm just a little worried. Mike Zimmer came out and talked about potentially limiting his workload, which isn't great. I think he said being smart about his workload, which is always a concern facing a 1-10 team. Other FanDuel cash locks, I like Allen Robinson quite a lot. I think that he's in a really good spot. And then I like James Robinson. I think that he's, going back to Robinson, you could go Montgomery. There's really some cheap running backs too that you could potentially look at. You could look at David Montgomery. You could look at Devontae Booker. You could go down to Myles Gaskin, who I'm liking quite a bit out of those 3. So I think that if you're going to go down, you're probably going to want one of those guys, if not 2. And James Robinson would potentially be that 3rd guy in that mix. Allen Lazard in cash, no. You wagered your whiskers on Sample. So yeah, for those that didn't see the power grid, I am shaving the beard and only keeping the mustache, maybe shaving the hair if Drew Sample gets outscored by Akins and Hollister. The reason I went with Ferkser is because Jonnu Smith is out, and he wasn't out at the time that we recorded the power grid. What do I think of the Carr Waller stack? I like Derek Carr a lot. The question is, what are we doing with Darren Waller? Because his price continues to be at $7,000 on FanDuel and on DraftKings. And this is where it's sort of important that please clarify, everybody, that the questions in what websites you're using. But DraftKings, I think let me pull up his price just really quickly. Waller. 6,100 and Carr is 5,800. So I like the Carr side of it. But Waller is pricey, and that's the problem, is that from a production standpoint, he really hasn't been there the last 3, 4, or 5 weeks. It seems like the Raiders are starting to get more and more guys involved. So if you look at just his targets, he's at 7, 7, and 5 over his last 3 games. And he's only topped 37 yards once in his last 5. So is there upside there? Yes, but I tend to think that a guy like Nelson Aguilar, who is starting to emerge, which it's only taken him, 5 years to really start being a productive NFL receiver, but he's topped 54 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. So I think that Aguilar might be interesting as a deep play threat there. Is QD cash game viable in FanDuel? What's his price? I just need to check it. I think there was one guy that I liked just a little bit more in that range. I think on DraftKings, he's absolutely one of the top plays because I think he's only like 3,300 or something. But on FanDuel, let's pull this up. Why is this running slow? Anyway, QT 4,800. So I think the argument there is that if you go down to him, you would be able to get either Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henry and Devontae Adams. So if you're going that route, it could work for sure. Can you get Cook and Henry in FanDuel cash? Yes, you can. It's risky though. It's risky. So you can go. So if I just build something out really quickly, and I will answer everyone's question. So apologies for anyone who is waiting a little bit. But if I look at Cook and Henry, and I take a guy at quarterback, you're going to have to go down to probably a Phillip Rivers or Mitchell Trubisky. And then at tight end, you'll have to go Ferkser probably. A little scary. You could go Kyle Rudolph, I suppose. And then defense, you're going to have to go call it, let's just plug in the Lions. And let me see if there's a way I can share my screen. That would be better, wouldn't it? Yeah, let's do this. Let's share screen. I'm not going to screw with it today. I'll figure that out for next week. So that leaves you 24,400. So if you start with Rivers, Cook, Henry, Ferkser, and the Lions, you have 6,100 per player for the next four positions. Definitely doable. I think that it's risky, like I said, but it's definitely in play. Is Aguilar cash game viable on FanDuel for a cheap option, or is he too erratic? So Aguilar, looking at his price, he is 5,400. So the guy I think that I like a little bit more in that range is probably Michael Pittman. So I think that the Colts are going to have a pretty big game. Aguilar is he might be a little too inconsistent for me. I don't know that I'm fully buying in on him as a cash game play. On FanDuel, I think that I like Pittman just a little bit more. FanDuel cash, does Dalvin Cook elevate Henry due to Madison being out? I don't think Madison really impacts that, to be honest. What did Madison have? 3 carries last week? I mean, he's not playing a significant role in that offense. It would be one thing if he was consistently getting 6-7 carries in pulling Dalvin Cook down. I just don't. Yeah, he's had so in Madison's last 3 games, he's had a total of 5 carries. And if we look at Dalvin Cook, the concern there is that Dalvin Cook's starting to wear down. So he's only averaged 3.6 yards per carry in his last 3 games. And part of that is due to he's faced really good matchups in those too. He had the Panthers and Dallas. So I don't know. I think that Madison has no impact for me, but Cook, I just think there's a little bit of risk there. You know, people are still expecting those monster 2 games in a row, and I don't know that that's going to be as consistent every week production. 4,400 on DraftKings. Need a receiver. Okay, let's see if we can help you out. 4,400. Say what contest? Doesn't say what contest. So guys that you could potentially look at. In a GPP, I think T.Y. Hilton is interesting. Denzel Mims is probably my top guy at 4,100 down there. Unless you really wanted to keep going down and go with a Kiki Cutie at 3,500. The rest of that range, you're looking at a bunch of Jacksonville receivers. You're looking at a guy like Danny Amendola. I'm not in on any of those. For me, it's Denzel Mims, 1, T.Y. Hilton, 2, and then if you want additional salary relief, I would go Kiki Cutie. If you wanted to go Brashad Perryman over Mims, I wouldn't kill you, but I think that I would prefer Mims a little bit more. All right, season long best flex. Drake, Gallman, or Claypool. Let's see what I have projected. Drake, Claypool, Gallman. All right, so I have Claypool slightly higher than Drake, but the range of outcomes there really, I mean, we're talking tenths of a point between the two players. So I would probably go Kenyon Drake just because I think he's a little bit safer than Claypool. If you're down and you think you need, like, let's say you think you're behind and you run your projections and think you're going to lose this week and need that two touchdown game, maybe you do go Claypool there. What is Kyler's outlook down the stretch? So I think Kyler is fine. If we look at his last couple of games, I know he struggled a little bit, but I'm not that worried about Kyler, to be honest. So he was shut down by Bill Belichick. I'm not sure that that's overly surprising. He was all right against Seattle, 269 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, look, is he gonna run for a touchdown every game like he did in the 8 of his first 9 games? I don't think that can be expected. I think that, what you're looking at is a guy who 250 yards, 1.5 to 2 passing touchdowns per game, 50 to 60 yards rushing, and hope that he gets a touchdown, which is probably about 60% of the time, I would say. So I wouldn't panic on Kyler. I think he's still probably I think he finishes a top 3 to 5 quarterback the rest of the way. Yeah, the beard might be going. We'll see. Yeah, Cutie's on my yellow for sure. For those that aren't aware, on my article on Football Guys, I go through and I grade players green and yellow, which is based on whether a guy is a great cash game play or should be in cash game consideration. All right, let's see. Standard, no PPR, season-long league. Who would you most prefer at running back 2? Yikes. Yikes. Sorry. First and foremost, you're a Jets fan and you have those running backs. That's not great. Let's take a look. Carry on. Probably out. I think it comes down to Bernard or Melvin Gordon. I would probably go. Just double checking. I would probably go Gio Bernard. Is Chubb Henry stack viable in a tournament? Yes. I think I think a Cook and Henry stack is viable. And we covered that a little bit earlier as far as how you potentially get that. You have to go down a quarterback to a Rivers or a Trubisky or someone in that range. I think there's a ton of quarterbacks in that range. Goff is interesting. I think that Derek Carr is interesting. A number of guys down that list, and then you'll probably have to go Kyle Rudolph or Anthony Ferguson at tight end to do that. But you have play guys like, I'm not sure the question there. There's a $3,300 receiver that I loved. Let me double check that. I might have said Kiki Cutie was 33. Yeah, there's no 3,300 guy that I love. It would have been Cutie at 35. So I probably misspoke there. Let's see. DK Cash, Glennon Tunyon or Fitzpatrick Ferkser. Parker and Chark are both locked in at wide receiver 1 and 2. It's a good question. So for me, I think there's 2 things to this question. One, I don't know that it's been 100% determined that Fitzpatrick is starting. It seems to be trending that way. However, I look down this list and based on the question alone, and that's sort of how I have to treat it, is how we're going to spend our savings and how we're going to actually spend up, assuming you can't spend up elsewhere, I would go Fitzpatrick and Tunyon, or Fitzpatrick and Ferkser over Glennon and Tunyon. I do like Glennon quite a bit. He's currently in one of my cash game builds, one of my 3 that I currently have on DraftKings. So I do like him, but based on the question alone, I think that I would go Fitzpatrick and Ferkser. Does William Jackson scare you off, Parker, at all? No. I mean, the Bengals are who are they even playing? It's Cincinnati, right? Yeah. No, it doesn't scare me. Okay. Let's see. You had Cook, Henry, Rodgers, and Adams, and you had to play Lazard. I think that's 2 stars in Scrubby. Looking to stack running back with the defense. Which one is the best? And they're all the same price. So I can get any running back stacked with their defense? Okay. The 2 options are Minnesota or Derrick Henry if they're the same price. And I would probably go Minnesota. I'd probably go Dalvin Cook in Minnesota over Tennessee and Derrick Henry, because Tennessee is the 4th lowest team in sacks. So it's kind of a bit of a weird league in that you can stack your running back with a defense and they're all the same price. But for me, give me the best running back because defense is so volatile. Have we gotten any Allen Robinson updates? No, that's a good question. They're saying it's precautionary. So for those that aren't aware, Allen Robinson left Friday's practice with a knee injury. And I don't know that we've gotten too much more news. Let me check just really quickly to see if anything has come down the pipe. But as I was writing the article this morning, it seemed like everything was going to be okay. He's questionable, but it seems to be precautionary. Friday practices are normally light anyway. So I don't think it's a big deal, but it's something to monitor for sure. Let's see. FanDuel cash, Eckler or Robinson? So great question. Right now I have Robinson. And the reason behind that is if you look at Austin Eckler, great game last week, came back, had 10 or 11 receptions. But the concern is, and he played 60 snaps, the concern is that he came out and said that his left leg still isn't right. So I don't know. I think that there's still risk behind Eckler, particularly around the Patriots. So the Patriots typically like to take away your best player, and they're going to look at the 16 targets and essentially say, okay, we're not going to let Austin Eckler beat us. Is Austin Eckler going to have 16 targets again? I think there's no possible way that happens. So I think Robinson is a little bit safer, although if you need the salary relief and salary is very difficult this week, let me just look at what I have them projected for. I think it was somewhat close, but as I was writing that up this morning, I think I had Robinson at about 18 and Eckler at 16. So there's about a 2-point difference between the two. If I was paying up for a FanDuel cash quarterback, would it be Watson? No. I think there's a range of outcomes with Watson that people are going to look at that Tannehill game and think it's repeatable. Tannehill had a big game against Indy last week, and I don't think Indy's defense is that bad. So, I mean, if I just pull up their stats here in a second, if I look at Indy, they've allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks this year. They've only allowed one quarterback. No. They've only allowed 3 rushing touchdowns to Lamar Jackson, Ryan Tannehill, and Joe Burrow. But I think that this is a game where the floor for Watson is pretty low. And the reason for that is he has no Will Fuller and no Randall Cobb. So is he a lock to have this big game? I think there's a possibility there. But I think that Aaron Rodgers is safer. If you're nervous about running Cook with Henry, who would you replace Cook with? Need more context, so just repeat the question and I'll answer it. So are we talking FanDuel? Are we talking DraftKings? I talked about James Robinson. I think Austin Eckler on DraftKings is a great value with that PPR. I think that Myles Gaskin, it might be my favorite play at 5,500 with Salvon Ahmed and Matt Breida out. So I think that any of those guys, and then in the mid-range, you're looking at guys like David Montgomery and Devontae Booker, who are both fine plays this week as well. Frank Gore, 5,300. He would be, but Matt Breida is there, and I like Breida a little bit more. Julio Jones, is he going to play? We got an official. So his latest report is that he's feeling good, but I don't know that we've firmly gotten that he's going to play or not. So Julio Jones, I mean, look, he's always a decent GPP play because nobody ever plays him. So from a game theory perspective, I think he's okay, but I'm not on him much. Thoughts on Gesicki? So let's look at Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, if I look at the game log, the problem with Gesicki is he has 1 touchdown since 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 touchdown in his last 8 games. And let's just go to red zone targets really quickly. So for a tight end, I think that if they're not scoring touchdowns and they're not, let me just look up Miami here in a second. Okay, he does have 13 targets and leads the team in the red zone. I think he's fine. I don't think he's great, but I think he's fine as a one-off GPP play. What do you think about having a lineup with or without? What do you think about having a lineup without Henry or Cook in GPP? I think it's fine. I think that, we saw last week where Dalvin Cook had a poor game, and those that didn't play him, were very successful. So do I love it? No, I think that I would typically take one of those guys, but if you're a multi-entry guy, I have no problem having a GPP lineup without either of those 2 players. Be able to, yeah. It's going to be dicey because those are all really big names. So you're really going to be at the bottom of the barrel if you're looking at Rodgers, Adams, Henry, and Cook in the same lineup. I don't even know if you can do it, to be honest. Anthony Miller? No, I'm not, he's not on my radar this week. Why are the Lions the best defensive play on the main slate? Because there's a quarterback in Chicago named Mitchell Trubisky who's starting. And if we look at how defenses score points, right? So a majority of the defensive points come from 3 things. Yes, they come from points, but points, once you get past 14 points allowed, really don't matter that much. If we look at how defenses are scored, it's sacks, interceptions. Fumbles are a little less predictable, but if we look at Trubisky, in the 4 games he started, he's thrown 5 interceptions and he's been sacked 10 times. And he didn't complete one of those games. So he's a turnover machine. He's a sack machine. He's not a good quarterback. The Lions, let me just pull this up really quickly. The Lions on the defensive side of the ball, not a great defense. I think that we can all agree with that. But at 3,500, it's really a driver of two things. One, the price, and two, the opportunity. So Detroit, their pass rush hasn't been great. I mean, they're in the bottom third of the league in sacks, but I think that they at least intercept him once, maybe twice. Could we see a touchdown from them? Potentially. But the Packers are also in a great spot against Philadelphia, although they're a little more expensive. And then if you want to go all the way up to something like Miami, I think that's fine too. But for me, it's the Lions are in a great spot because of Trubisky, and it's really that simple. And their price. Detroit released Marvin Hall today. What do you think about Quintez Cephas? Let's look at snap counts. So pulling up Detroit snap counts really quickly. Quintez Cephas, 30% of the snaps. Marvin Hall with 60%. Sanu is probably the guy that's interesting. I don't know what his price is off the top of my head, but he seems to be sliding in as the number 2. Cephas is interesting, but how much how much he's actually going to perform, knowing that he had opportunities very early on and didn't succeed. If you want to take a shot in a GPP, it's not the worst play. How low would you go on FanDuel for quarterback for cash? A lot of people would say Mitchell Trubisky. I'm not going there. For me, it's Phillip Rivers at 7,000. Frank Gore and the Jets D and the Millie Maker for FanDuel prove that extra salary to get Cook and Henry. Ooh, I just don't know that Gore has the upside. So even if he scores 2 touchdowns, I love Frank Gore. I've made that very clear on the Power Grid. But does he have the upside to win a milli? He's going to need 4X. I suppose if he scores twice, he could. So if he has the type of game like Adrian Peterson, I think he could. But that's a tough bargain. Does anyone from Cincy scare me? No. Trubisky and Montgomery really chalk. Montgomery is for sure. Let me look up where my current latest numbers are that I haven't uploaded yet. So for those that aren't aware, I do roster percentages. Some other sites call them ownership percentages for football guys. And let me pull up where my latest numbers are. So I look at my latest numbers. Yeah, so I think Trubisky is going to be somewhere. He's not going to end. I don't think he's going to end up as the most popular guy. I think he ends up somewhere in the mid range. But Montgomery definitely will be one of the more popular guys. Let's go back here. Is Gaskin a safe play coming back from injury? I think so. I think that two things working in his favor is one, Salvin Ahmed and Matt Breida both out. So they have no one else to go to besides Malcolm Perry, who's more of a wide receiver. And I think Gaskin, when he's played, I think he's averaged 18 carries over his last 4 games. So I think Gaskin is pretty safe. Do I like Gaskin, Booker, and Montgomery in cash? No, I would in cash. I would try and get one of Cook or Henry. I would really try and make an effort there. Am I comfortable Ferkser in cash? Comfortable, no. Willing to play him, yes. I think it's a week where if you're playing paying up for one of those top guys, especially if you're paying up for two, you're going to have some uncomfortable plays. And I don't know that there's a single tight end on this slate that I'm comfortable with. My favorite tight end on the slate is TJ Hawkinson. But, Darren Waller, are we comfortable with him? We just talked about him being under 35 yards in 4 of his last 5 games. So I don't know that there's any tight ends on this board that I love. And Berkshire is fine. Gaskin with Booker with Las Vegas D or Montgomery with Bears D. Montgomery with Bears D or Booker with Las Vegas D. Probably think about going. I would probably go Montgomery. Yeah, Breed is out. Let's see. Yikes. Okay. I mean, that's a GPP play if I've seen one. I mean, Sample isn't great. I would probably go Ferkser there. Carry On is scary, and then QD is scary. So you could, if that's cash, I have a hard time with that one a little bit. I would go a little more balanced. FanDuel 4 p.m. flex spot. James White, Henderson, or Akers. Let's look. Admittedly, they're not guys that I had been looking at, but we can certainly pull this up. Akers, Henderson, or White. Probably White. James White for me. Is this the week we can go back to Taysom? Yeah, I think you could certainly go back to Taysom. He's definitely in play. Last week is really weird because I think the Saints sort of knew that they were playing Kendall Hinton at quarterback, largely just shut down, just score 7 points and you're probably good. And they didn't really want to have Taysom Hill do much. So facing Atlanta, I've talked about it here and I've talked about it on the Power Grid and on Football Guys Writing, is that Atlanta has one of the best run defenses in football and one of the worst pass defenses in football. So if I'm thinking about a way that Taysom Hill beats them, and we've already seen it, right? But I think that Taysom Hill is forced to do a little more this week. Michael Thomas, I think that he potentially could bounce back. He's certainly not the guy that's, with Drew Brees and going to see 14 targets like we have in the past, but I think he's good enough. Henry or Adams, one off flex. Give me Henry. Raiders allowed 28 points to the Falcons D. Do the Jets hold any value? No. Jets aren't on my radar. I had the Jets last week, but I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one because the Raiders are going to be a little conservative, and they're not going to fall behind and need to run the ball that much, or need to potentially turn the ball over that much. Gaskins or Booker depends on the site. FanDuel, I like FanDuel. I like Gaskin because of the savings on DraftKings. Let me pull up their salaries just really quickly. Gaskin and Booker. Give me Booker because he's $400 cheaper. Let's see. Landry and FanDuel cash, or is it point chasing? Yeah, this is a good question. I think that cash, it's chasing. In a GPP setting, it's not. But here's the problem with the Browns, right? So we don't really know how their offense is going to evolve, because since Odell Beckham tore his ACL, they've played 4 games. And in 3 of those games, there was such horrendous weather that passing was really a non-option. And then all of a sudden, in the 4th game, Jarvis Landry has a monster game. So is that real? I think is a question that you're going to have to ask yourself. I don't believe it is. Is he a guy who's going to have 60 or 70 yards? Probably. Is he going to see the 13 targets that he saw last week? Maybe, but if the game script goes that way, so I like him with a Derrick Henry stack, and that the Titans get up early, Henry scores a touchdown or 2, and then they sort of just ride him. But in cash, I'm not going there. Mayfield Landry stack on FanDuel with Derrick Henry bringing it back. I would not do that. I think Henry and Landry together is fine, but the problem with Mayfield is if his floor is, his upside and really his floor are both really low. So I understand the Landry call, but if Landry succeeds, he's going to have about 80% of the Mayfield work. So I think you could stack a different quarterback and almost have 2 stacks going on at once. So you'd have a Henry Landry stack, and you would have a quarterback wide receiver traditional stack. Mahomes Hill, run it back? Sure. I think that's fine. Yeah, Burrito over Gore on FanDuel. Mostert or Montgomery? Montgomery. Worth it in cash? No, I wouldn't do that in cash. It's too cost prohibitive this week. I think it's more of a GPP play. Hines, Booker, or White? DraftKings. I think it would be either Gaskin or Booker. They're close. They're both really close. If you have the 400 and you don't think you're sacrificing much, I would go Gaskin, but Booker is also in a tremendous spot. I wouldn't consider Hines or White in that grouping. Thoughts on Tennessee wide receivers? Corey Davis is the guy that I like, mostly because he's cheap. I think A.J. Brown is a little too expensive, and I love Derrick Henry this week, so it's hard to fall in love with A.J. Brown considering how much I like Derrick Henry. Rodgers, Gaskin, Robinson, Thielen, Pittman, Adams, Frisker, Eckler, Lyons, D. I think it's fine conceptually. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It doesn't have Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henry in it, obviously, but it can certainly work, particularly if it's a GPP play. Is Bell a go if CEH doesn't play? Yeah, I think that Bell is in a great spot if Clyde Edwards-Helaire does not play. No, I don't think a Saints stack would work with Kamara. Taysom Hill's value is the rushing touchdowns. He's not a guy who's going to I'm assuming you're meaning Taysom Hill, Kamara, and Thomas. If you're saying a full Saints stack, I think that's too much. Aaron Jones seems to be the running back nobody is talking about. Nobody's talking about him because the matchup is horrendous against Philly. So, and Aaron Jones's price, for whatever reason, just hasn't come down. So if I look at Philly run defense, they are allowing 3.4 yards per carry on the year, and Aaron Jones is priced up at 7,200 on DraftKings. I just think his price needs to come down a little bit more. Nick Chubb at 7,700 is probably a better play. James Robinson's a better play. Austin Eckler's a better play. I would potentially look at Alvin Kamara as a potential better play, because if we look at Aaron Jones, he's sort of Miles Sanders-like in that touches just aren't consistent. So, 17, and these are rushing attempts. 17, fine, that's good. 10 is not good. 13 at 7,200, probably not good. 15 is fine. 15 is probably the minimum that you want. But against that Philly defense, I can see a scenario where they just pepper Devontae Adams and go through Tunyon and other players, and it makes it a little bit challenging. Cash games, Corey Davis, maybe. I'm probably not doing it, but you could probably talk me into it. Tannehill or Ryan streaming season long this season or this week. I could also pick up Rivers. It's an 8-man standard. So let's look just really quickly. I think about 8-man standard, 8-team standard, I should say. Tannehill, Ryan. Or who's the third one? Rivers. It's Tannehill. Booker, Montgomery, Gaskin. These three and fading. Yeah, those are the three. If you want to fade the high-priced running backs, those are the three that you want to go cheap on. Do I like Tyler Boyd to get you to Dalvin Cook? Assuming you're talking about DraftKings. So let's take a look. Tyler Boyd is 4,900, I want to say, 4,700. In that range, look at wide receivers. I need to figure out how to share my screen so I can show you guys what I'm doing, but that'll be a next week thing. In that range, guys like T. Higgins, no. T.Y., no. He's probably the best in that range. I might consider going down to Denzel Mims and upgrading somewhere else, but I just don't trust Brandon Allen all that much. Is there anybody above that? I love Pittman at 49 if you can find 200 more. Renfro or Ruggs? Probably going to go with Renfro. I think he's more touchdown upside. Best tourney stacks on FanDuel. Best tourney stacks on FanDuel. I think that the Adams-Rodgers one has to be top of most people's list. The question is who you run it back with. You could potentially run it back with Miles Sanders, although that's a little bit risky, but Green Bay's run defense has been horrible. I think one intriguing one is Goff, and pick either Woods or Kupp and then run it back with Nuke Hopkins. Thoughts on Jefferson and cash? Probably not. I think that last week was the week for Jefferson. Adam Thielen comes back this week, and that really limits Jefferson's red zone targets. So I think he was 141st in the NFL in red zone targets, and Adam Thielen was like third. So a lot of the touchdown that he scored last week was largely due to Thielen being out. So I don't know that I would go that route. Difference in 25 double up cash line and $5, $10 cash line, single entry is substantial. Which way are you saying? The 25 is easier? I think that flips quite a bit, to be honest. And something like last week, Dalvin Cook would have been more popular in the $25 than he was in the $5 or $10. So that could have driven it down. I think it really just depends. Oftentimes, the higher dollar that you move, the higher the dollar, the sharper the players are. That doesn't always mean that, but a lot of times that's the case, because there are limits as far as how many contests you can enter at the $5 and $10 entry point. So the more that you enter in that price point, the less pros that you will actually face in that range. So I would have to look at a larger sample. And if you have data, I'd love to review it. Any interest with Jordan Akins? The problem with Akins is he's going to be really popular. So I understand why they just don't have anyone else to run to, but he's going to be about 20-25% rostered. So I think that there's a strong case to be made for Akins on DraftKings. I don't know that I love him on FanDuel, but I think that he's a guy who he's that popular for a reason. I think that you're seeing what everyone else is seeing, and that he's a decent play this week. Moving down here, Renfro Ruggs, I already answered that. If you like Henry, do you not like Tannehill? It's not that I don't like Tannehill. He's just too expensive. So on DraftKings, just pulling up his price. If I look at Tannehill, he's 6,200. And what's his upside, right? So Ryan Tannehill, if I think about him as a quarterback, the problem is he's had a couple fluky things happen in his last couple of weeks to hit value. So he's only topped 225 yards once in his last 6 games. He's a very safe guy who's going to, probably throw for 1 or 2 touchdowns, but at 6,200, I think his price is just a little too inflated, right? So he said, from a rushing standpoint, in 4 of his last 6 games, he's ran for under 10 yards, which just isn't great. It's not good enough. If I look at quarterbacks in that price range, I can get someone like a Taysom Hill, who's much more likely to rush for a touchdown. I can go down to a guy like Phillip Rivers, who's much more likely to throw for 300 yards. I can keep going down the list and name off quarterbacks in rationale that I like more than Tannehill. And on FanDuel, he's just way too expensive. Just Cup's inconsistencies in cash scare me away. So yes, it does. Would I rather play Woods or go to Parker if Fitz starts? I would rather play Woods for sure. I just don't know that I can afford him in my current builds. Would I rather play Parker? Probably yes, but I'm even having a hard time finding that extra $200 on FanDuel. On DraftKings, if I look at their prices, 64 for Parker, Cup is 61, and Woods 59. So yeah, I would play Woods over Cup in cash on DraftKings. Cousins, Jefferson, Thielen, super stack in GPP on FanDuel with James Robinson. Bring it back. Too much wide receiver in Minnesota. So the way that would work is if Dalvin Cook gets hurt early in the game, which possible with his injury history. I think that's definitely possible. I don't know that I would go probable, but I don't know that I think it's too much, to be honest, because you would need Jacksonville to keep scoring to force, or you would need Jacksonville to get out early and get up early. That's another possibility. It could work. It might just be a little too much. Rivers, Cook, Henry. I mean, reviewing these cash games is hard. I think it's fine. Would I play Glennon alone or stack with a wide receiver? And if so, who? In GPPs, I would go DJ Chark. And the reason for that is Glennon has a big arm. DJ Chark has deep potential. I think that we saw with Colin Johnson last week, I think he had 8 or 9 targets, and he was filling in for Chark in that role. So if there's a guy that I would stack with, it would be DJ Chark. Am I going to give Trey Burton some love this weekend? He's fine. He's fine. Nothing special. I think his floor is somewhat high, but his ceiling is relatively low. I like Rivers a lot, so he's fine. Any love for Cole Kmet as a cheap tight end? Probably not. Probably not. I think Ferkser at the same price is a better play. Adam Thielen or A.J. Brown, DraftKings. I would probably go A.J. Brown in a GPP. Thielen in cash, but I don't love either one in cash. Who are my top quarterbacks? So my top quarterbacks, it really depends on the site. And I please, guys, everyone, if you could mention the site, that's super helpful. Top quarterbacks, I like Phillip Rivers the most on DraftKings or FanDuel cash. My current DraftKings cash has 3 guys. It has Rivers, it has Mike Glennon, and it has currently it has Derek Carr. Derek Carr will probably come out of that build, and I will either go to Taysom Hill or I will go down to potentially Mitchell Trubisky, or I'll just consolidate into Glennon and Rivers. Do I think Cousins will go under rostered? Yeah, I do. He always does. There's a hatred for Kirk Cousins out there. Mike Williams or Devontae Parker? Devontae Parker. Booker or Montgomery? Yikes. If I keep singing, I'm going to get an audition. So for those that don't know, Scott is Carrie Underwood's keyboardist, and a very good one at that. So, yeah, let's see. Gun to my head, Booker or Montgomery. It's the hardest question of the day. I think it's David Montgomery, but I also have a tweet that's pinned to my Twitter account that says, if I ever play David Montgomery again, someone please slap me. So I have a personal bias with Montgomery, but I think he's in a better spot. Rodgers, Cook, Henry is at the start in FanDuel this week. It's expensive, and you're going to have to go with a guy like Alan Lazard, who I just don't love. But in a GPP, sure. My hair is all over the place. Maybe I do need to lose a bet so I can shave it off. Yeah, I'll look at that. I don't know that a couple people have talked about the Jets D. I don't know that I can get there. How many players do I typically have in my player pool? It depends on the week. I mean, honestly, I don't do more than 5 or 10 GPP lineups, to be honest. Doing 150 is really difficult, and it's not a lot of fun to me. It's more of a portfolio, and you're looking at this person impacted me in 20% of my lineups, and I had 10%. It's just not fun. I like to manually build my lineups and really try to be close to them and know exactly what I have going on. So I think it's 2.5 times, however, 2.5 to 3 times as many roster spots as you have. or as many lineups as you have, 2 to 2.5 times. But if you get up to 150, obviously it's not that many, but so it really depends. I mean, I think it's, I'm not the person to answer that question, to be honest. FanDuel game stack, Cleveland, Tennessee with Henry, Tannehill, Davis in the same lineup. That's a lot. It's a lot. What do I think about the Seahawks defense? So I like the Seahawks defense. Facing the Giants, facing Colt McCoy. I do like Colt McCoy. I'm probably out there on my own that McCoy as a passer might be better than Daniel Jones. Veteran, 34 years old, but there's a range of outcomes there. Doesn't have a strong arm, and that's going to limit some things. So I think that, if I'm looking at Colt McCoy, you're really hoping that he dinks and dunks down the field and gets some garbage time. But the Seahawks defense, not a must play, but they're fine. 6 points per passing touchdown. Start to Hill and Fitzpatrick. I'm not playing Baker. It's fine. I mean, it's really difficult to review full lineups just given the limited time that we have. So unless there's a big red flag, I'm not going to say one way or the other, to be honest, because there's so many different possibilities that can work. Is Snell a must play in cash if you're playing Sunday, Monday? I haven't even looked at Benny Snell. Mostly because I don't play the Sunday, Monday slate. Is he a must play? No. Is he an okay play? Yeah. I would have Myles Gaskin ahead of him quite a bit. I don't like him all that much on DraftKings. On FanDuel, same thing. He's not coming up at super high for me. I like the Montgomery, Gaskin, and Booker combinations a little bit better. I mean, Benny Snell, he's just so limited, and that's the problem. Downhill runner, was great in college. Loved watching him play, but he's only averaging 3.5 yards per carry. On a receiving side, he caught 3 passes last week, but this Baltimore defense was really limited, and he should have had a better game than what he did last week. They didn't have Calais Campbell. They were missing a couple other players as well. And if you looked at the Ravens prior to the Pittsburgh game, Derrick Henry and Damian Harris both topped 100 yards, and Snell couldn't top 60. So I don't know that I would go there. Henry or Cook? For me, it's Henry, but you can't go wrong with either. I think I'm in the minority there, to be honest. I think that most people like Cook. Woods or Cooks? I think the majority of people will say Cooks in cash. For me, I'm going Woods in a GPP. I think there's a real worry there that Cooks is going to see a double team all day. And is Cooks good enough to break a double team? Probably. But losing Will Fuller, I don't know that it's that big of a positive, to be honest. Goff, Hill, Baker, Fitzpatrick. Goff and Hill. Chris Carson in cash on DraftKings. I want to say no. But let me just check that. He's not in my build, I'll say that. But before I just say no off the top of my head, no, it's not there. The lack of volume continues to be a problem. So I believe he was outsnapped by Carlos Hyde last week, and I think that there's a real worry that How much volume, and is he ready to go? I'm hoping to keep the hair. We'll see. If Sample gets a 0, I might have to take the hair. But I look like Marv from Home Alone, so maybe I can dress up like that for the Christmas spirit. Carson or Gaskin and cash. Gaskin. Do I always allocate 100% of my salary? It depends on the contest, and the answer is no. I don't like to leave more than like in a cash game setting 300 to 500, and in a GPP like less than 800 is sort of where I'll go. But I don't always go to the exact dollar. Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, Scott. It's that's the worry with Dalvin is they're being, like I said in the beginning, they're being smart with his workload. And whatever smart means, I don't know, but I don't really like to pay $10,500 on FanDuel or on DraftKings $9,500 for a guy who's going to be smart about his total workload. A lot of people think there's a significant difference between Cook and Henry. I'm not one of those, so I'm probably in the minority. And this is where there's a lot of smart people in this industry who just think Cook's numbers pop, and they do. And, the props are big and the touchdown numbers are big. I'll be on the other side of both. So if Cook has a big game, I'm probably in trouble. On DraftKings, I may go Cook and Henry, but Henry is my top guy this week, and it's a little bit scary. But if you're stuck, if anyone on here, I just want to clarify, if anyone on here likes Cook over Henry, I'm not going to talk you off of it. I'm just a little worried. Would I throw Wentz in a GPP? Initially, I say sure because of the rushing upside we saw last week. He had 40 yards rushing, I think. But, man, that's tough. You get Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert back, I think, this week. So they may have already been back. I haven't been following the Eagles all that closely. But if Tua starts, does that make Devontae Parker unplayable in a GPP? I think so. I think Tua is just not – he's not ready to be the starter. And, the offense has limitations with him. DraftKings, Taylor, Gaskin, or Gallman, Montgomery. I'm not playing Jonathan Taylor, so Gallman and Montgomery. Which Saints player do I like more, Kamara or Thomas? Kamara. I think it's more consistent workload. Taylor, Gaskin, Carson. Gaskin. FanDuel. Hawkins is 3 points higher than Ferkser. Dolphins D and Ferkser over Hawkinson and Lions D. I'm going Hawkinson and Lions D. It's close. I just don't pay for defenses, and that's my philosophy I've used over the last couple of years, is that I've heard every argument about why this defense is great and how poor this defense is going to be. I tend to think, and I've had this conversation with our projectors at Football Guys as well, I tend to think that in general, projections for defense is one of the hardest things to do, and it tends to get overinflated because what you have is the difference between like a 40% chance at a touchdown and a 25% chance of a touchdown are all factored in there. And, all of them are still unlikely to score a touchdown. So in a cash game format, you could get lucky and score a touchdown, but I'm just paying down and hoping that sacks, interceptions, a team that's decent. I just don't pay up for defenses. All right. I'm going to answer just a couple more. I know that we're over time. There's still 133 people here, which is amazing. So thank you all. If you haven't done this, give this a thumbs up so that other people can find this and it helps the channel. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please click that red button and subscribe. I'll go about 5 more minutes. If you have other questions, I would encourage everyone to get them in now. We can talk strategy. We can talk really anything. But I'm going to sign off here in about 5 to 10 minutes. Let's see. Taysom or Tannehill, no interception penalty. It depends on the league, but if you need consistency, I would go Tannehill. If you need upside, I would go Taysom. Cousins with Eckler and James Robinson. If you play Mahomes, it's Booker and Eckler. Probably go Mahomes. Yikes. I don't like either player, and I went to Ohio State, so, J.K. Dobbins should be the choice here, but let's put bias aside, and I just look at it in a vacuum. I'm going with Jonathan Taylor. I think he's a little bit safer. Dolphins D, obvious pick, I think. Like I said, I don't pay up for defenses. In theory, they should score the most, but I just don't pay that much for them. Defense equals pressure rate, pass attempts, and matchup. Part of it's the opposing quarterback too. So we've seen games where teams give up 24 points because the other team is passing quite a bit, but passing creates opportunity. And that's what you should always be thinking about when you pick a defense is you want a team that's going to throw the ball quite a bit. So like last week, I didn't like the Broncos. They were okay. On a cost per dollar basis, they were about the same as the Jets, who I had a lot of, but they were facing a team that just wasn't going to throw the ball. And they had a missed snap, and they had 2 picks in 7 plays. Like, there were some fluky things going on there. But, saying that they were a must-play across the industry, I think, was a mistake. Rank these running backs from a floor-to-ceiling standpoint. Robinson, Eckler, Gaskin, Montgomery, or Booker. Robinson, Eckler, from a floor... I don't know what you mean from a floor ceiling standpoint. So they're different things. I actually think the order that you have them in is the right order. Robinson, Eckler, Gaskin, Montgomery, Booker. Yeah, that's the right order. T. Higgins, Crowder, or Shepard? T. Higgins, Crowder, or Shepard? I think it's Sterling, Shepard, then T. Higgins, then Jamison Crowder. The Jets went from just Jamison Crowder to now having Denzel Mims and having Rashad Perryman, who's going to see some targets. So I think the days potentially of Jamison Crowder seeing the 14 targets might be over, but we'll see. I think that Shepard is safest play. I think that he'll see a lot of the underneath stuff with Colt McCoy, where Darius Slayton actually takes the biggest hit. So I would go with that approach. Cheapest wide receiver under 5,700, favorite wide receiver under 5,700. That would go to Brandon Cooks at 56. But I think that's the obvious one. So let's go a couple different guys. So I think Corey Davis is interesting. I think Sterling Shepard, like I just mentioned, is intriguing. If you need a home run play, someone like a Nelson Aguilar or DJ Chark, but it's Cooks. It's and then if you want to go under 5K, it's Pittman. How do you determine player exposure when building multiple lineups? Should player exposure differ in cash and GPPs? So cash, I don't worry about it. I don't worry about what other people are going to do. And mostly I'll only have one cash lineup. Some weeks I'll have three, but most of the time I'll just have one. GPPs, like I said, I'm only doing 5 or 10 lineups, so I like to take stands on certain players. GPPs, there's so many different strategies that if you're a 150 lineup player versus a single entry guy, it's very different. A lot of people cap it at 25%. A lot of people cap it at 30%. A lot of people cap it at 50%. So it really depends on your comfortability and how much risk you want to take on whether or not you want to be burned by certain players. Oh, you meant from each perspective, floor and ceiling. I lost the question. If you want to repeat the question, I'll answer it. Lazard or Valdez Scantling? Yikes. Probably Alan Lazard. He's expensive. I mean, that's the problem. So it's Alan Lazard if you wanted to play one of them. I mean, Valdez Scantling, you're hoping for a deep play. No. There's a lot of math in the rostership percentages. A lot of math in there as far as a lot of history, listening to a lot of different people talk about it, looking at value across different sites and who's projecting to be the top plays on a per dollar basis, and then running a lot of simulations regarding potential lineups. So if there's a cheap guy that's going to be popular, that ultimately raises the top end guys because it creates more salary availability. So it's definitely not just guessing. We'll put it that way. I'm assuming this is wide receiver. It would be DJ Chark. Would I pay up for Kamara? Depends on the type of contest. At the moment, I don't have very much of Kamara. I think I have him on one lineup, but he's just not. I mean, his price is getting down enough where he's manageable, he could be playable. But Taysom Hill is taking a lot of the red zone work, so yeah, he's not a must play by any means. Tough matchup against Atlanta too. Really tough matchup. In the scenario that Robinson is out, Darnell Mooney might be out. And if Darnell Mooney is out, then that leaves only Anthony Miller and David Montgomery. So I think it helps. I think it helps Montgomery because it'll get him more targets out of the backfield. All right. Floor. Let's go. Robinson, Eckler, Gaskin, Booker, Montgomery. Ceiling. Let's go Eckler, Robinson, Montgomery, Gaskin, Booker. Yeah. Sure. Start 2 full PPR. McLaurin, Diggs, Pittman, Carson, Taylor, Gallman, Claypool, Jefferson. McLaurin is a yes. Comes down to Jefferson or Diggs. Diggs. I look at them. I'll admit that I look at them. It's just another projection source. So it's are they wrong sometimes? Yeah. Are they right a lot of the time? They're okay. I think that they tend to skew towards what the public is thinking a little bit too much. So if you're building lineups solely on that, I think that's probably a mistake. But it's another data point, and having as many data points as we can is helpful. Best value running back on DraftKings. I think it's probably either Montgomery or Myles Gaskin. If Robinson is out, who do I plug in? I don't know yet. Probably changes my entire lineup, to be honest. Landry, Cup, Woods, DK, Cash. Woods. Okay. So I think I'm caught up. I will go till 9:25, and then I will cut it off. So 2 more minutes. If there are any other questions, speak now, or I will see you next week. Also, I give out my FanDuel cash thoughts on Sunday mornings. I know that a lot of you checked that out last week, so thank you. Give me a follow at Devin Knotts FBG on Twitter. That's where I post the free link. It is only free this year for the Sunday morning thoughts. The more detailed articles behind our paywall, and next year the free thoughts will be as well. But I just wanted to throw that out there. Do I like Cutie from Houston? Yeah, I do. Do I like Myers or Bird? Myers. What's a good defense? What's a good defense? Lions, Packers, Dolphins, all different price points. Yeah, I'll type my Twitter in. Let me pull this up. Twitter is okay. Last couple of questions. Yeah, I think there's value. So River 74 brought up a good point. Even if you're a season-long guy, I think that there's value in listening to some DFS people. I think it helps you with decision making. Richie James on the Sunday Monday slate. I think that's reaching a little bit. Let me see what I have Richie James projected for. Yeah, I have 5 points for Richie James. Wouldn't go that low. Mims or Perryman? Mims. Any last questions? I think that's it. Seattle D or Pittsburgh D? Let's look. Seattle D or Pittsburgh D? I would go, it depends. If it's just straight up, I would go Pittsburgh. If it's a value play, I would go Seattle. Thoughts on Boone? If Cook doesn't go, it won't matter. We talked about it earlier where Alexander Madison had 5 carries in his last 3 games. So Boone won't have much of a role. Okay. And with that, I think we're going to sign off. It's 9:26. So we went for about an hour and a half. There's still over 100 people here, which is crazy. And I want to thank everyone for coming out. Thank you. And if you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up. Really helps the channel, and it's free to do. So, and with that, we should be back next week. The next couple of weeks, I'll admit, maybe a little bit challenging. There may be some time changes. I don't know, because of the holiday things that I have going on, and we will try to do something. I don't know what time yet, but stay updated on this. I'll try and get it scheduled early on this site, and then I'll post it on Twitter as well. So with that, I want to thank everyone. Have a great night. Stay safe. And hope everyone wins this week. See ya.